Imagine a man so large his bed was made of iron, over 13 feet long, a king who ruled from fortified cities, a living legend whose mere presence struck terror into the hearts of nations. But one day, in a place drenched with divine destiny, this giant fell, not to sword or strategy, but to the power of the living God. This is the rise and fall of Og, King of Bashan. And the question remains, what can his story teach us today? The bigger they are, the harder they fall. This ancient saying might well have been first whispered on the day Og fell. The name Og evokes mystery, might, and monstrous legend. To his enemies, he was a towering nightmare. To his people, he was a fortress of security. But to God, he was simply one more king standing in the way of a divine promise. What happens when a man thinks his size can stand against the word of the Almighty? Let's journey into the story of Og, his rise, reign, and ruin, and what his fall reveals about God's unstoppable purpose. Og reigned in the northeastern region of Canaan, an area called Bashan, rich in resources, fertile plains, volcanic plateaus, and fortified cities. Archaeologists believe this area was among the most strategically important regions in ancient times. It linked Mesopotamia with the lands west of the Jordan. But what made Og so terrifying wasn't just his territory, it was him. He wasn't just a king, he was a titan in the ancient world. The Bible tells us he was the last of the Rephaim, a race of giants whose origins echo back to the days before the flood. The people feared them. Even seasoned warriors trembled at the mention of his name. Deuteronomy 3:11 reveals a stunning detail. For only Og king of Bashan remained of the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, his bed was a bed of iron. 9 cubits was its length, and 4 cubits its breadth. 9 cubit? That translates to a bed over 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. Why such a massive bed? Because Og wasn't just tall, he was a giant. He was feared, powerful, and rich. His race, the Rephaim, were known for their extraordinary size, and some believe they were remnants of the Nephilim mentioned in Genesis 6:4. Giants who once made the earth quake beneath their feet. Og's lineage was ancient, shrouded in mystery and might. He ruled from 2 major cities, Ashtaroth and Edrei, both strategic fortresses in Bashan. Not just one city, but an empire. Deuteronomy 3:4 tells us that Og's domain included 60 fortified cities, walled and secured with bronze gates. No one challenged Og. No one dared. He was a living legend, until Moses showed up. The Israelites had been wandering for 40 years of the wilderness, 40 years of waiting, 40 years of buried dreams, dry lands, and fading memories of Egypt's grandeur. And now, on the cusp of their destiny, they faced one final obstacle: Bashan. Their recent victory over Sihon, king of the Amorites, had stirred the land. But Og, he was no Amorite. He was a giant, a king of mythic strength and supernatural legacy. And so, fear whispered again through the camp of Israel. Mothers clutched their children. Warriors questioned their fate. Could they face a giant king with 60 cities behind him? But then came the voice of God, bold and unwavering, spoken to Moses. Do not fear him, for I have given him and all his people and his land into your hand. Deuteronomy 3:2. Og had heard about this nation, Israel, how their God drowned Pharaoh in the sea, how they have been conquering mighty nations. He didn't wait to be attacked. He came out to face Israel in battle at Edrei, the capital city. Imagine the scene, a clash not just of armies, but of destinies. One side massive and armored, led by a giant king with iron weapons and chariots of thunder. the other led by a man with a staff and a word from God. But fear had begun creeping back into the hearts of the Israelites. They saw what stood before them: a giant king, 60 cities, elite warriors. Would history repeat itself? Would fear steal their faith again? God spoke again to Moses, loud and clear, "Do not fear him, for I have delivered him into your hands." Deuteronomy 3:2. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a prophecy. The Bible doesn't give us every detail of the battle, but it gives us enough to know it was a crushing victory. At Edrei, Og led his elite forces out to meet Israel. His men were trained, heavily armored, and confident in their king. After all, Og had never lost a war. Who could stand against a man that tall, that strong, with cities behind him and terror before him? But there's a truth Og never understood. No height, no might, no fortified wall can stand against the God of Israel. Numbers 21:33-35 recounts the moment. Then they turned and went up the way to Bashan, and Og the king of Bashan came out against them. And the Lord said to Moses, "Do not fear him." So they defeated him, his sons, and all his people, until there was no survivor left. The defeat was total. Og, this towering king, fell in battle. His entire army was wiped out, not a single survivor. Even his fortified cities crumbled before the advancing Israelites. The Bible says, "We struck him down until there was no survivor left, and we took all his cities at that time. There was not a city we did not take from them." Og's vast kingdom, known for its strongholds and fertile lands, became the inheritance of half the tribe of Manasseh, Numbers 30-33. His massive iron bed remained a symbol of what once stood against God's people and fell. It wasn't Israel's might, it was God's promise. The fall of Og was more than a military victory. It was a spiritual milestone. This was the last major enemy before crossing into the Promised Land. Og represented the final and greatest challenge, the impossible barrier, the unbeatable foe. When Og fell, the psychological stronghold over Israel fell too. This was the same generation whose parents had feared giants back in Numbers 13. Remember the 10 spies who returned and said, "We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes"? Og was one of those giants, but now by faith, not fear, they had faced and defeated the very thing their ancestors had run from. And God gave them a reward. They inherited Og's entire kingdom, the 60 fortified cities, the lush lands of Bashan, and the territory that would become home to half the tribe of Manasseh. A victory beyond imagination. Og's story is ancient, but his lesson is eternal. Og represents the giants that stand between us and our destiny. Giants of fear, doubt, sin, or spiritual oppression. They are intimidating, powerful, and sometimes deeply rooted. They make us feel small and unworthy of what God has promised us. But Og also represents a defeated foe. One who looks mighty but has already been delivered into our hands. Because when God makes a promise, no enemy can stand against it. The Israelites didn't need bigger swords. They needed bigger faith. In our lives, we don't conquer giants by might, but by obedience. When God says, "Do not fear, for I have given it into your hands," we are not called to calculate how. It's already done in the heavenly realm. Og's name doesn't disappear after his death. Throughout the Psalms and other books, Og is remembered as an example of God's power to overcome the impossible. Psalm 135:10-11 says, "He struck down many nations and killed mighty kings, Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan." Psalm 136 repeats the refrain, To him who struck down mighty kings, for his steadfast love endures forever. Og, king of Bashan, for his steadfast love endures forever. The Israelites sang about Og. His downfall became a testimony, a song of God's deliverance and enduring love. Even centuries later, prophets and scribes invoked his name to remind the people, if God defeated Og, he can defeat any enemy. You and I may never face a literal giant like Og, but we face spiritual ones every day. A diagnosis that seems too heavy to bear, a financial crisis that shakes your family, a calling from God that feels far too big for someone like you. These are modern-day Bashans, territories where giants roam. But remember, you are not alone. The same God who said to Moses, "Do not fear him," says the same to you today. The giant is already defeated. The city is already given. The promise is already yours. You just have to walk forward and believe. If this story encourages you, don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. Subscribe to Biblical Exploits for more dramatic retellings of God's unstoppable power through the lives of men and women in the Bible. And remember, your greatest battles are the perfect stage for God's greatest victories.